Peace by Leo Tolstoy is a really great book. I really enjoyed reading it. But it is not a book to be read as a challenge. If anybody were to do that, they would miss the whole point of why it was written, and they just wouldn't get out of it what you can get out of it if you are interested in the story. I think the only reason why you should read War and Peace is if you have an interest already in the setting and in the idea. I think if you're just reading it for the kind of stones of saying, yeah, I read one of the longest books ever written, I've read War and Peace, then you're going to really struggle to physically read it, because you're just going to get bogged down with it and it's going to be a real chore. And what's the point? I mean, who cares? I think Game of Thrones is about 5 times longer than War and Peace, and that's really easy to read. So if you want to read a book that's that's really long, go and read something like that. The only reason you should read War and Peace is because you actually want to read it. So I bought this copy at least 7 years ago, I think, and I just left it on my shelf, and I thought to myself, to be honest with you, I bought it for the same reason. I bought it because it's a famous book for reading, and I thought I want to be able to say to people I've read it. But I just couldn't do it. Every time I kind of looked at the first page, I just thought, sounds boring. No. And I put it back, and I waited and I waited and I waited to be interested in the story. And then finally, I was interested, and I grabbed it off the shelf and I started reading it, and it was amazing, and I really loved it. So, from my own personal experience, I'd say you have to approach it like that. You can't approach it any other way. The actual story is set in Russia during the Napoleonic invasion, which is 1812. So it's sort of a strange time for Russia, because, I don't really know the politics that well. I learned quite a bit of the politics from reading this book, but Napoleon had quite a strong grasp of, this was sort of at the top of Napoleon's power, so it wasn't when he was in decline. He was quite a strong force, and he had an allegiance with Russia, but then he'd turned on Russia, and obviously this war had started, and then he slowly started making his way through Russia. So the first, I think it's about the first third, maybe the first half even, is all set before his invasion, and you're introduced to all these different characters, and there's a family. There's this one really angry kind of guy who's the son of a rich and respected man. Then there's this other son who is wealthy, but doesn't have any respect, and he was raised in France, which is kind of a nod against him because the Russians generally don't like the French. And you slowly learn all about them, about their family, about the relationships, things like that, how important their kind of parents are and the grandparents and all this kind of thing. So it starts off as quite a kind of pretty average but interesting sort of social saga thing, and there's loads of names. Luckily, this copy, it begins with a huge family tree thing which tells you all of the names, and I actually put a bookmark next to it, so whilst I was reading I had to keep referring back because I couldn't figure out who was who. But within about 3 chapters he reduces every character to a nickname, and it just sticks. You honestly just pick it up and you immediately know who he's talking about. And even though there's a lot of characters, because he describes them so well, it doesn't matter that there's loads. You do slowly get used to it all. And there's loads of hilarious Russian things which I didn't know anything about, which you start to pick up on, which is really interesting. Like, they didn't celebrate birthdays, they celebrated name days, because they're all such strong Catholics. Every Russian person was named after a Catholic saint, so instead of celebrating their birthday, they celebrate the saint's day that is what they're named after. So there's other little things like that you pick up, so you get to know all of their lives, and then suddenly Napoleon invades, this war happens, and everyone's lives are turned upside down. At least 2 of the characters are eligible for the army, so they immediately disappear to go and fight, which immediately puts you in concern. The big family, the 2 of the sons go off to fight, and you understand what it's like because you're there with the sisters and the mother and the father, knowing that they're doing the right thing by going to war, but also you're worried that they're going to die. So then the invasion occurs, and you don't just get the invasion from the point of view of the families, you suddenly get the invasion from the point of view of some of the generals, and you're introduced to new characters who are actually in the war fighting. So there's kind of a bit of action, but also a bit of political intrigue at an exciting time in history. It is real, like it really happens, so you can research some of it, and that's fascinating. Some of the actual characters in here are real characters from history. And then as this invasion kind of occurs, you then get the tail end of it, so the last sort of quarter of the book where it really kind of becomes almost like a page turner, like a thrilling story, is where you discover, where you re-meet all these characters, and the characters kind of meet back with each other and discover how much their lives have changed from that first beginning where everything seemed rosy and nice. Now everything's been turned upside down, and everybody understands the priorities in life, and they get their priorities straight, which is about survival, which is about family, which is about keeping together. And things like class and things like sort of all these petty reasons why they didn't like each other are just thrown out the window. So it's really fantastic. It kind of bridges the gap of class and of conflict and things like that, and politics. And it really is as good as everybody says it is. It is a fantastic book, and it's so rewarding when you get to the end, because not only do you get to the end of the fantastic story, but you can then say to yourself with confidence, yeah, I just read War and Peace, and you know what, I actually enjoyed it. It wasn't even because I just did it because I had to, and I was forcing myself to read the pages every night so that I could go around telling everybody I've read it. It was actually something that I really enjoyed doing. So I only read it if you want to read it, but read it. It's great.